This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and MV Welman.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, episode 29. Harry, how's it?
How's it, MV? You're probably really happy about the Bulls at Loftus. I got to tell you, there was a try there with Willie off the left foot to Boeta Chamberlain, who has the most north-south name in the world, Boeta Chamberlain. And then he comes inside to David Creel, who streaks away. What I liked about that, besides the skill level and the quickness, that's a 3-second try, is that there's no possibility of a TMO getting involved. It was just so clear as day. Like, there it is. There's the try. And I long for the days where tries were tries. You didn't have to psychoanalyze, honestly reconstruct whether or not it was a try. It was just glorious to watch. Also, your boy Cameron Hanekom was so good over the ball, and I saw that he has some tricks in his bag. One of them is the Francois Lowe trick of rolling the tackler to you. So in one play, he gets tackled. I think it was Steenekamp got him. And then Cam just kind of helped. He helped the carrier to be in the right position for Steenekamp to disengage and then go pilfer. That was really high IQ rugby, and you must have enjoyed it. That's why I'm wearing the light blue cap. I'm not happy for you guys all the time, but on a day like that, I mean, if you don't like that, you don't like rugby. That was super fun to watch.
Yeah, I was there, and I said to the guy I was sitting next to, I'm missing a good game here because I was occupied with other things.
No, but it's interesting when you saw the Boks, the young Boks. I mean, obviously, old Boks come back, they're always confident and they know what they're doing. But there was, across all the teams, when you saw, no matter what South African team you're watching, and you saw people that had recently become Bokt, and they came back to Urk. Oof, they looked really, really powerful. They looked like a different level,
That is, we actually talked about it in the press box when we were watching the game. All these guys there, and we said it's amazing how grown up these guys suddenly look. Ruan Orkeer doesn't look like a young boy with a beard anymore. He looks like a man. Eldridge Lowe looks like the sheriff. He just needs the freaking Stetson, that kind of a thing. They just took a step up. You can clearly see it. I mean, Marco's always been there. He's been there for a while, but they made a huge difference. And I think if you look at Ruan, for example, looked like he bulked up a bit. Eldridge even bulked up a bit. Gerard Steenekamp, Jake said afterwards, he actually trimmed his beard for the first time in a very long time, because he doesn't have a double chin anymore, because he's so fit now from coming back after this from the Springboks. It's interesting.
He's the opposite of Samson. He's actually got stronger by cutting off his hair. Ben Jason Dixon, the Stormers, was also looking very lively and more muscular. Like, I think they actually ate some different food there. And I liked it. There was a double tackle he made, and then he pilfered. So that kind of level of whatever, that battle stat, right, you talk about, I think the expectations at test level can really inform you. You go back to club level and you realize, different level. That's why I want to see Hanekom play on the end of year tour, because I want to see what a supersized, revved up Hanekom looks like. He looks like something that could be trouble for the other teams.
Well, I saw you made an emotional call there, so please let us have Hanekom against Scotland. So, I mean, Jake was actually quite adamant or vocal about it. He says, now, who am I going to have to sacrifice? Is it going to be Eldridge Lowe or Cameron Hanekom afterwards? And he said after the press conference, and I said, I'm sorry, Jake, I think you're going to lose both. And he was, how can I lose both? How can they use both at the same time? And I asked him this question on the Saturday night press conference after the game. I said to him, now, with Eldridge being picked at 8 for the Boks, and Ragnar van Tonderson showing us that the Boks 7s and 8s are not the same as the Bulls 7 and 8. And Jake said actually that opens a lot of possibilities to him. He can move Eldridge to 8, and then he can play around with his 6s and 7s. Namakaba, Kobus Wieser, even Ruan Orkeer on 7. There's a lot of possibilities. Ronald Ludwig. So for him, it actually opened a new world to him. It's quite an interesting observation that he made there.
Jake is never happy anyway. Yeah, Vern Carter and Jake White are the two coaches. If you want to see their faces, even when something's going well, they always look really, really grumpy. It's funny to me.
No, I don't think so. I don't agree.
Jake is happy. I'm just saying, when you look at him on the sideline, you don't. Sometimes it's hard to know that his team's up by 40. He just looks like he wants more. I want more. I want more out of you.
You sent me a little video clip. He literally stopped his feet when the Bulls made a mistake. It was so funny.
Like, you're winning by 40. It's okay. He's like, no, I think he likes perfection. And I was thinking about that, about coaches in general. and the differences between them. And there's just some coaches that really have standards. And in the end, I think, especially at Test rugby, that's what it always comes down to. You know, set your standards. You can be a guy who throws things. You can be a guy who's quiet. You can be a guy who looks just disappointed. You can be a guy who tells you disappointed. But in the end, the best coaches are the ones that set standards and never make excuses.
Yeah. All right. Listen, we're going to talk about the UFC in more detail towards in this week's second episode 30. But this week we're going to talk about the just have a last look at the Rugby Championship, a little bit of a poetic Harry review. And then we're going to do a bit of a profile on Rassie, one of the first, if you want to call it a profile. And lastly, I just want to remind people about the third Confessions of a Rugby Fixer that dropped Sunday night. Harry talked about overcoming your own flaws and using it to advantage and winning. That was a good one, Harry. I like that one.
Yeah, the reactions to these are really interesting. I mean, some people you wouldn't even really expect, hard men, tough guys, reaching out to me, emailing or WhatsApping me and telling me that was moving, and they reveal something about their life. And I think you'd be surprised. Anyone out there that's, envious or jealous for someone else's success, everyone's got something. Everyone's got a problem. No one's family is perfect. You think it's perfect. Behind the scenes, there's something really dark and tragic. And I think that's what rugby is all about. Like in any game, even the game where everything does fall your way, there's always a little patch there where it doesn't go your way. There's always a mysterious call that you don't understand. And, you're just handed. So I think that's doing well. I'm really enjoying it, although it's kind of tough. I'm telling you, it's tough to sit down in front of a camera and confess. I've always built a life around strength and, imperviousness, and no one can touch me. No one can get me. I'm always winning. But behind it, I'm thinking it's interesting. And some young players in the Cape area reached out and said their teams are watching these and using them as motivational tools to understand the soft skills of rugby, the behind the scenes stuff. And the other good news is you've made me a TikToker. What's this Cheslin Colby TikTok? What's happening there? Like, we don't even know. I don't even understand TikTok, and here I am, a TikToker.
Yeah, I barely scraped it together, but yeah, no, it went well. The Cheslin one just took off. It's funny, and then the France one did very well on X, for that matter. It's interesting how the different audiences responded differently to the little odes. What did you call them? I said an ode to France, and then the Cheslin obsession.
I like it. Yeah, no, you're turning into quite the director. All I'm doing is trying to imagine what people would really write about and say if they were being, coming clean. So it's a bit like Confessions in general. Listen, our game has the most interesting people. I don't know why rugby has never really acknowledged this. We tend to have the good prefect go there post game and say, we tried our best and, it was a good game and rugby was the winner. No, we got some very interesting cats, and the Springbok team is one of the best in all time. And part of that is because everyone has such a different vibe. And then you have the puppet master behind it, Rassie, doing the making everything tick on time.
Very interesting. Just before you and I started recording this, there was a Bulls press conference with Kobus Wiese, the lock, Jasper Wiese's brother. And they asked him, Ken Boland asked him, in 2018, you were in the Springbok camp, and then things went a little awry for you, and he said, he broke his neck, and he had to come back. But then he sort of sat back and thought it was going to come to him, and he's now realized the work that goes into the work ethic that the Springboks have, and what it's going to take from him to be able to get back into the Springboks. And that was quite an eye-opener when he talked about that. They asked him specifically about, comparing himself to someone like Pieter-Steph du Toit, because he can also play lock and 7. And he was quite adamant, if he can be nearly as good as Pieter-Steph, he'll be more than happy. But he realized that it's going to take a lot more work than he initially thought it would be.
I told JJ this, your Pretoria friend JJ, Johan, that Kobus Wiese is such a stealth, low-level, under-the-radar, incredible pick for the Bulls. In his club in England, he was the players' favorite, the fans' favorite, because he's just a worker. And he has, I don't know what's going on in the Wiese family, but it must have been tough to get your arm in at breakfast and get some food, because these guys, they play heavy. I don't know if that makes sense, but whatever their weight is, I think it's heavier when you tackle them. And he's a big block of a man. I think that the Bulls were lacking a tight head lock, like a real enforcer lock. And it doesn't have to be flashy. I think with him on the field, Ruan gets to shine a little bit more.
Yeah, no, he specifically said that. Jake said that the difference in physicality that Kobus made and the way his arm span, is that the right word? How wide he is. Nobody gets past him. Wingspan, nobody gets past him. So that was quite interesting. All right, anyway, last week we did a couple of the reviews of the other teams, All Blacks, the Pumas and the Wallabies. From a poetic standpoint, poetic point of view, you did a bit of that for the Springboks. Just let us hear. Let it rip, Barry. The Springbok Ode.
Oh, yeah. No, listen, the other teams are more stereotyped because they come from one thing and they have maybe the New Zealand has a blend of two kind of cultures mostly. But South Africa's, how do you even explain, right? Springboks are now in their full glory, combining what I call the joy and simplicity. I mean, even in Nelspruit, the song that was sung before the game is the poem. My oom se motor is 'n ou masjien. Hy maak dit vol met dieselien. En hy sing in die strate as hy ons kom sien. My oom is oud en ek is skans 13. Such simple words, but it paints a picture. I'm already in the street and I'm imagining the old guy, you know? And then it finishes with just that simple, what I've called onomatopoeic nature of Afrikaans, where a lot of the words come from sounds, you know, even if it transported from Dutch into the continent that they didn't know. So many words became sounds. My oom drink koffie en my tannie tee. Ek vra oor die reën en sê ja nee en hy drink soet koffie met 'n een oog toe en hy praat weer oor die dree van Mannetjies Roo. Don't you like a poem that ends with Mannetjies Roo? And I think if that's all that Rassie did was make, you know, we're going to be flipping tough and hard. I'm going to play bok ball. We're going to make our first time tackles. I'm going to win the set piece. We're going to be Heineke Meyer, but a little bit better. That wouldn't have really done what this happened. What happened was he added the spice. And now you got to go down to the Cape and you're going to talk about like the cream machine, you know, which is also simple, but unbelievably fun. Shout out to Manny Lubbock. You know, we just go down the list. The Lekkerbacks, Justin Colby. Doen jou ding. Doen jou ding. Jy moet dit bring, jy moet dit bring. And that kind of like rhythm where you don't even know when the ball is coming to you. I don't even know sometimes if people know when Manny's passes are coming to them. And so you combine that, you know, the diesel machine and the coffee in the can and the Mannetjies Roo, and then you stick all the spice around it where people are doing their ding and you don't even know when that ding is happening, but it's lekker. And then what I want to close with about this particular era of the Boks is Rassie. And Rassie, I always think, listen, Rassie, I think it's all about your youth. We're just watching a guy recapture his boyhood. And here's a poem by Longfellow, My Lost Youth, because I don't think Rassie had a childhood. There are things of which I may not speak. There are dreams that cannot die. There are thoughts that make the strong heart weak and bring a pallor into the cheek and a mist before the eye, and the words of that fatal song come over me like a chill. A boy's will is the wind's will, and the thoughts of youth are long, long thoughts. My heart goes back to wander there and among the dreams of the days that were, and I find my lost youth again and the strange and beautiful song. A boy's will is the wind's will, and the thoughts of youth are long, long thoughts. Because every time I see Rassie, I'm right back with him in the book that he wrote about his small town and how much he's still trying to prove, you know, how much he's trying to prove to us that his father was a good man, that his father was a musician, that his town was good, that his friends were good, that the Human family down the street was good guys, that there was more to it. There's more to it to him. And anyone who grew up in a family where there was a up and down, melancholy, moody alcoholic at the head of it. If your dad drank too much, you know, if you're hearing this, you know what I mean. Even the good times were kind of scary because you were waiting for the shoe to drop. And so we're looking at a guy who knows how to play a song that's jazz, it's chaotic. You know, when you see that video of him doing the shuffle, the dispatch shuffle with the brandy and the cargo shorts, there's always music in Rassie's head. It's never quiet in there. And so somehow he's managed to channel that into rugby. And we're watching a beautiful thing. We're watching a thing where the Boks are now unpredictable. You think Rassie's childhood was unpredictable? He didn't know whether, what was going to happen every night. Now you don't know how to prepare for the Boks. You asked me to look at the World Rugby Championship, and I think it was so fascinating that, yes, the seeds are there. The old machine is still there, the dieseline, where you have 15 scrum penalties for the Boks and 1 against. Okay, that's old Bok rugby, but it's supersized. 15-1 scrum penalties is unbelievable. A scrum is mostly about generating penalties now. It's not about good, clean ball, attack, launch pad. It's about generating penalties. Frans Malherbe has built an entire career. He is plus 40 over his whole career on scrum penalties against versus scrum penalties for. Give me 40 scrum penalties in your career. I'm picking you every time because that's an easy exit and easy entrance. So that's the normal stuff. The line-out got fixed in the final match, finally, right? Set piece. No cards as the championship got, really serious. There was the no cards match and only 7 penalties conceded. But then when you look at the whole season of Boks versus all top 10 teams, including Ireland, it's all over the place. Envy, I'm telling you, a year ago, if you laid down the shape of games that the Boks played, if they were against top teams, they were all the same. There was 28, 29 kicks. There was 110 passes. There was 5 to 8 offloads. There was the same high tackler was the high tackler. The same high carriers were the same 2 high carriers. They came from loose forward and center. Now you look at 2024, Rassie has turned the Boks into the least predictable team in world rugby. You could have a game where there's 93 passes, another one 91 passes, and then you look at a game and there's 171. You know how far back you have to go to see a Springbok match where you have 171 passes? I'll give you never. It never happened. So, and those don't correspond with wins and losses. It's just different. And then you see, the high tacklers, mostly Peter Steph de Toy, a lot, but also you have guys pop up from nowhere, like Frans Malherbe having high tackles. There are 3 matches in which the 2 locks, Eben and Ruan, are the high tacklers. Feeding them into that tackle threshing machine. The system set up where I'm maybe even missing a tackle, not on purpose, but I'm just routing you in. So you're turning in to Eben and Ruan. Have fun with that. Then you have high carriers coming from the least effective, where Kwacha was the high carrier in 2 matches. We didn't look right, and we were down on the try margins. And then it kind of shaped into finally where you had, a Visa and a Damien Delende. That's where you want to be. But the interesting part is you could also have a game where Fassi was one of the high tacklers. And so what's happening here is the Rugby Championship was won, and it was won with aplomb. It was one going away. But more importantly than that, Rassie wanted to see new things. Tony Brown wanted to test players under his system, and they didn't want any team to say, we know, the Boks are coming. It's hard to beat them, but we know what we have to do to beat them. That was for 30 years, playing Heineke Meyer. Oh, they're going to have great set pieces. Their first 4 phases are going to be scripted. They tackle hard. They don't like to let you have tries. But if we do X, Y, and Z, we can beat them. And that's what happened. Whereas now Rassie's like, do your best. I'm going to pick my team on Tuesday. It's going to make no sense sometimes. You won't even know what to pick. I am firmly and directly and embeddedly in your head. And that's where people are coming at it now. In the end of year tour, I think no one can tell you right now who the team's going to be. And if they do, they're lying, because no one knows. No one knows anything that could happen on 9 and 10, for example. Anything could happen. So what I think is interesting is the old cornerstone of Bok rugby is here. The embarrassment, the shame, the disgrace of the bad years, they really weighed heavily on Rassie. That is almost like he was living through his childhood again, watching those scores that had, that number that I never say. And so that was fixed by making us hard again, but not that smart necessarily, just hard and tough guys again. And then now he's adding on what he thinks we need, which is the music that he had in his house, the art, the extras, the fun, the vibe, and dare I say it, the drama. I don't think Rassie is ever happy if everything's too smooth. So that's where we are now.
I wanted to ask you that specific question, and we talked a bit about the previous Boks coaches who didn't quite make it, and there was quite a significant difference between them and Rassie, for example. And one of the things is constant innovation. Now, innovation is typically associated with going to the mountains and sitting next to a waterfall or something and let your mind be, swept clean. Think about Leonard Cohen going to a monastery or something and, finding himself again. Rassie never did that. He just kept changing the personnel around him. And that was quite interesting, the fact that I don't know if it was by choice, but for example, that Jacques Nienaber left him. That's quite a big thing. But it was a seamless transition and almost into this next phase of, where he wants to take Springbok rugby. Is that a true reflection of where Rassie gets his new ideas from, getting it from different people and then sort of melding it into something new?
Yeah, I think so. It's like we all have different creative processes. I mean, even you and I, when we build these podcasts, we have a different way that we go about it. And I imagine everyone in their normal walk of life, when they have to go to work and they work in a team, they have some people like to work alone first and then bring their ideas to the team. Like, here's my marketing program. What do you think? Other people like to generate the idea in the group itself and shoot like terrible, terrible ideas and some good ones, and then the good ones come out, and the marketplace idea. Rassie's always struck me as someone who loved to be around people. I think he has a story about himself that he wants to be true, the strong, silent, taciturn man, that probably he looked up to, and that was the quintessential archetype in the Eastern Cape as what he should be. But it's not true at all. I mean, like, he really likes to be around people all the time, and he does care what people think of him, and I don't think he surrenders to it. I think he still wants to come across the way he wants to come across, but he does actually pay attention to other people in the room. And I think he likes, from what we can tell from the way the meetings are portrayed in Chasing the Sun, both series, and from what I know from people who have told me this, who have been working inside the camp, players, is he likes the back and forth. He likes if you sent him to the mountains and said, go to Namibia and stare at a canyon wall and, look at this picture for 10 minutes without talking and come up with, one clear, shining idea, that is the linchpin of 2024 to 2027, I think he would go mad. He likes to be in the town. He likes to be in the small town, the big city. He loves it, and he feels safe there. He feels not alone, and so I don't think he's like some of those other coaches. There are coaches who go to the mountains, proverbially or literally, and they get ideas. Like Andy Farrell's a bit like that. Like, goes off into the west of Ireland or the north country of England and, hikes around with a stick and looks at the sky and comes up with something. And then has all of his coaches do the same thing. Go away, don't talk to me. I don't want to hear from anyone for about 2 weeks, and then come back and around a fire and share some ideas. Rassie is a 24/7 guy. He's got it's like a washing machine in his head. There's all kinds of stuff. If we could actually hear those things, those stem thoughts, and we could get them out and look them down on the paper, I'm sure they'd be very, very complicated. Because in amongst all the rugby ideas are other things like, am I good enough? What can I do to help someone? Can I save this guy? Will he save me? I remember I had this huge party a few years back, and I invited people from all different parts of my life and different places in the world, and it was a roast. They got up and they just one after the other roasted me, which I adore. I think it's hilarious because I don't like flattery. And if you're real friends, it can really give you the shit. And then in the end, they all came out to the same thing, right? When they're trying to be nice, they go, yeah, Harry, you keep us safe. You make us feel safe. I always felt like it would end well if you were with me, you're a good guy to die with, that kind of stuff. And then the question always was, so who keeps you safe? And I think Rassie is, I don't know the answer, by the way. So Rassie has built something here where he is bringing people into stardom, fame, raising them up. Some of these players probably owe their entire career to Rassie. They probably think about, whether he likes them or not all the time, just like Rassie thought about his dad. Is he good mood, bad mood today? Is it going to be good? Are we going to have fun? Are we going to hug? We're going to have a good time? Or will I be stopping him from hitting himself because he drank too much? So, the question is, Rassie, who soothes you? Who comforts you? Who makes you think you did okay? Who says, son, you did it. You're a success. I'm proud of you. You can lay it down now and enjoy. Like, who does that? I don't know. I have no idea. MV, you may know. You may know someone from the inside. I feel like he has to do all the time because he wants to get it. He wants to get it right. He's a complicated guy. He's not like the other coaches in World Rugby. He's way more interesting. In my opinion, way more lovable. But geez, he's also frustrating to people as well, and you know that because, this is a long run of success, but life has taught us that sometimes there's some dips. And so I don't know what that looks like. Maybe he's even better. I don't know. But, it's interesting to see what happens when you get everything you think you wanted. Are you happy? And for people out there that haven't got it and they think, oh, if I just had this much money, or if people thought this, I'm telling you right now, 2 days after you get all the money you thought you needed to have, and you could go down and buy whatever car you wanted for cash, you feel the same. You're irritated about the Wi-Fi. You're mad about what your son said to you. So, Rassie is not a contented guy. He's not easily satisfied, and he's just way more complicated than the other coaches.
I want to talk to you about the depth chart. You and I have been talking about the depth chart. You're going to do something with analyst Gus on X or Twitter. That's quite interesting. But before I go into the detail of the depth chart, Rassie has now been building up to this 2027 World Cup, and he's started, bringing new players in, and he's a bit ahead of the curve, he's better off than we thought he would be by this time or this stage. And but Rassie's got a bit of a darker side. If he doesn't like you anymore, and that's a problem. He's now sent players away in the past. Some of them managed to come back. Some of them overcame this kind of thing. But you're the bad side of Rassie. And we know, like Sasha, now, we talked about it in the confessions, your third confession yesterday as well, where that relationship of trust is a bit broken for some reason. Maybe the player wasn't all that honest, like Sasha. And we saw this weekend with Matanzima for the Bulls. He kept quiet about a heart problem and ended up in hospital and potentially ruin his career. That kind of a thing. You end up on the wrong side of Rassie. How does that work, and where does that come from?
We learn how to be angry and how we are when we're angry from our parents. It's the ultimate laboratory. So when you read Rassie's book, he tries to tell you everything. Now I think there's a lot of dissembling there too. There's a portrayal of Rassie by Rassie that's still a bit, because he's in the middle of his career and because he still has another World Cup to go, and he wants to end this thing by riding off into the sunset, like the gunslinger, the one that won every fight and made the town, work again, and now the townspeople can be okay and all the bad guys are gone, but he wants to ride into the sunset. And so we're not really getting the full picture yet, but geez, there's an anger inside Rassie. There's an anger inside all of us who battle demons and are still trying to prove things from childhood that we'll never be able to prove because, the arbitrators are gone, and we'll never get what we think. And even if your dad is still alive, sometimes he's not with it. So you don't know. It's hard to get back there and do it. Rassie's trying to do something on both ends, the future and the ride of the sunset, but he also wants to correct the sunrise. And he wants to go back to the beginning and see if he can fix that too. I know that because when I read his book, which I know is ghostwritten in some ways or co-written, but still, it's his words. Rassie gives us the answer to your question of what happens when his dad is angry, and therefore what happens when Rassie feels betrayed or let down, and how difficult it is to have a relationship with a guy like that. for a long period of time unless you basically surrender and say, you are the boss in all ways, and I just play for you. You know, I make you happy. I fit into you. You know, who are his peers? Which one of the players can say to Rassie, you're dead wrong, or you overstepped the line there? When you talked about my dad that way, we're going to fight. I don't care how old you are and whether you're the and whether you're the captain, the coach, whatever, you know, I'm going to bust your head right now. Is that okay? Can you do that in the camp? I don't know. He's a bit of a cult hero, a bit of an iconic figure now. He's risen beyond coach. Let's just say that. Rassie is something, but it's not just a coach. And it's not the director of rugby either. It's something much bigger than that. You know, he's the minister of culture for real. So, you know, and your ability to stay close to him is the currency. It's like in monarchies, you know, how close you are to the throne, whether you get to whisper things in the ear of the king or not, and where does his favor lie? But for me, you know, and this is because of what I do, I'm an interrogator. I always just imagine if I was interrogating that guy, what would it sound like? If I had to, like if something bad happened and Saru said, you know, come interrogate. I think Rassie would be a hard target. He is a very smart fellow who's got layers and layers and layers of defenses. So I imagine we won't really know the full story about Rassie until he himself has done whatever he thinks is the sunset and rides off. And then I think he's going to come clean like nobody has ever come clean. I think that's what we're going to see, a confession to end all confessions.
Do you think maybe that this cult hero status that you referred to is a bit exaggerated? That he might, I'm not saying he might have feet of clay, he doesn't. That's not what I'm getting at. But he might not be as exalted and as omniscient and, you know, or that kind of a thing than what he's being given credit for. He's become a bit of a cult hero, like you mentioned it, and it's a bit unrealistic. And when things start going south, like you mentioned, it might go. Is he going to fall from favor sooner than others, for example?
Well, maybe envy is a very strong impulse. It's self-destructive. I mean, no one should be envious. No one should be jealous. It's stupid. But every time you succeed and you're doing well, even if you look like you're doing well, people are envious of you. And I'm sure that Rassie has already experienced it. I'm sure that Rassie has plenty of enemies. For all the talk about how much people love him and whether he could be elected, you know, Prime Minister, President tomorrow, sure. But there's also a lot of enemies. There's people who are secretly thinking, he's not all that, you know, or I know this other story that you don't know, and they want to share it. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that really bothers him. But I think by now it doesn't bother him. I think it did. But I think he's realized that comes with the territory. If you're going to be on top, you know, you're going to have people at the bottom nipping at your heels and biting your ankles. Again, I would go back to his book to understand that. And I think Rassie wants to portray himself simply, you know, like what's the opening statement in his book? People think they know me. And that sentence is interesting to start a book like that. People think they know me. So you think, okay, so then write a book and tell us who you are, you know? Mm. And at the end of the book, I think to myself that if I'm Rassie, I think I know me, but I don't. Like, I don't think when Rassie wrote that book, he knew himself. And so the reason why is because he said, people think they know me. And then he said, you know, I'm from a small town. They had no hospital there. I'm Hani, not Rassie. I come across as loudmouth, extrovert, opinionated, arrogant, unrepentant, troubled, angry, complicated. Okay. And then he says, no, I'm not those things. I'm nervous. I'm private. I don't want to be the center of attention. I'm uncomplicated. I'm uncomfortable. And then I was a happy boy in a small town. And then in the biggest understatement of the book, my father was difficult. I mean, come on, you know, there's a big gap there between something in the middle, which is you can be a shy guy who wants to be the center of attention. You can be a sad guy who ends up being a comedian. You can be someone who did come from a small town, which was uncomplicated, but you are really complicated. And I think that's where, you know, if I was waiting for the real autobiography, it would be at the end of it all, when he's gone back to back to back or not. And, you know, I think we try to find Rassie at our peril because, you know, until he finds himself, it's going to be difficult. But I view him as someone who's sort of a rugby musician, a coach conductor, like a jazz man. You know, he talks about his dad playing the ukulele, the banjo, the guitar. And it's like the part where he was happy was when he was watching his dad play the musical instruments. Like he was more excited than even the rugby part. You know, stringed instruments, all of them stringed instruments, which are always the most human of sounds. The violin sounds like a person sad singing. You know, banjo, these are really emotive instruments, and they're sad, really. And his dad was named Abel, you know, the opposite of Cain, maybe too sensitive. So I think he said his dad was a pianist at age 4 and a matriculated at age 16. Like, obviously, you know, got a lot of DNA brains from the guy. Big-hearted artist, you know, and like a lot of addicts we know, probably tender-hearted and tough in his own way. I think he said that his dad was hit by a train and survived. So, listen, I think Rassie is comfortable in chaos. He's comfortable in the ups and downs. Sometimes when there's a loss, I kind of feel like he hates it, but I think he's almost excited by it. And he's excited about building back and getting revenge. I think revenge is one of his motifs against the people who talked down to him, against the headmaster and the dominee that came by his house and said, you know, thoughts and prayers, basically, you know, ons is hier vir julle, and, you know, I think ons weet waar die julle gaan. And then Rassie says in his book, they would do fuck all to help us. That's an angry statement. And it means that he doesn't look at the establishment the same way that a lot of other coaches does. He wanted, and I think he succeeded, in changing the way rugby is constructed and thought of in South Africa forever. And I think he wanted to turn it on its heels. In some ways, he's getting revenge for sort of like the working class, the guys who didn't have everything. They weren't born with a silver spoon. He talks a lot about, you know, not really knowing how to do anything when he became a Bok, how to fly, how to get a ticket. You know, his English was bad. He didn't know how to even go to Durban. So, yeah, I think that we're watching a tale play out, which is actually super fascinating and interesting and kind of nerve-wracking too. You know, the first part of the Rassie journey, I think, put all of us on edge, and you never knew what was coming out. And now we're more in the settle down phase where people, you know, are praising him, you know, the English, the Kiwis, the Irish, all tipping their hat to him. But I think there was also a part where, you know, he didn't know sometimes what he was doing either.
Now that refers to the video he made, for example, where we talked about it. The only pointed out the mistakes that Berry made that was bad for South Africa. Didn't do the other way where he made mistakes that benefited South Africa. And that's now changed a little bit. He's got a bit more mature. Yeah. But you mentioned he changed rugby forever in South Africa. He's also changed rugby in the world, the way it's officiated, the way coaches are looked at. He's now the first guy who's actually got a full-time referee on staff to make sure the Boks play according to the rules and that. There's a new maturity to him that makes him, I want to say more dangerous, but a more complete coach. And that in itself is, I suppose, a bit dangerous.
Yeah, I remember when there was that tackle by Farrell on Esterhuizen, and then he made a sarcastic video about it. It was funny, but it was somewhat immature in some ways. And what happened was a couple of years after that, the Boks became the lowest tackling team in world rugby. I mean, it wasn't even close. You looked at there's a guy who actually does that, looks at, you know, low, middle, high tackles. And the Boks from 2019 on have been by far the lowest tackling top team in world rugby. So there's discipline there. And I think sometimes the show, you know, the impresario circus performer over here is hiding back over here, him going to one of his assistant coaches or maybe to Jacques and said, we got to become better and different. It's the contrast that will see us through. If referees see a clear contrast, I mean, all humans learn by contrast, like a baby, yes, no, up, down, hot, cold. If we can just show the world that we are impeccable, that we tackle low, that our guys are good guys. None of us are thugs. Our packs are really tough, but Peter Steff, Frans Malherbe, these guys are not like, no one's thinking them as the fighting guys. They're just really hard-working guys. Mostert, these guys, they're not in any way dirty. We will have the benefit of the referee. And that was a much more mature way to approach referees. You know, present, earn your own stereotype, earn a good stereotype that, oh, the Boks are here to play. If I'm a ref, like, oh, we're gonna have a really hard tackling, low tackling game, like the pool game against Ireland, you know, where the Springboks lost, but it was so clean. It was such a clean match. There was no card even came out of a pocket or was touched. You know, the referee didn't have to worry about that. So I think that Rassie's childhood prepared him for tough times. I think, you know, I've talked about this in the confessions, that you can talk about the cards you were dealt. You know, no one really wants to have the kind of childhood that Rassie describes: nerve-wracking, arguing, drunk, scary, his dad abusing himself, protecting his father from his father instead of the other way around, driving at age 10 so that your dad wouldn't come to trouble, climbing on the roof, waiting for your paw to pass out so that you could be safe to come down from the roof. Nobody would want that childhood. Nobody would say that's the right way to parent a Rassie. But when you say, you know, did it make the man? Absolutely. There's levels to Rassie that can handle Makazole Mapimpi, Siya Kolisi, even someone like Ibn Etzebeth, who maybe started out a little too fiery. There's a way he can manage the man, like you said before, more than just, you know, where you got to be in channel 13 on the second phase. It's also, how do you handle yourself when you're so upset? Like when something went wrong and you just want to pile into that next ruck and, you know, take someone's head off. You know, how do you talk yourself down? And how do you comfort the man in agony is what he put it out. I think he put that in his book. How did he comfort his father in agony? So much of Rassie is intent and so much of Rassie is instinct. And where the lines are between instinct and intent, I don't know. But I want to read that book. You know, don't tell me again you're a happy boy from a small town. I get all that. But, you know, not that happy a childhood. I think it's more interesting to talk about what really happened from then to now. The dreams, you know, of him. I know he didn't feel ready. He didn't feel ready for stardom. He didn't feel ready to be a top Bok. He said often that he handled it badly. And I think he's trying to do something different now. And I do think it's nice, and we should point this out about Rassie, is that he's kind to, not just hard on people, because he can be very hard on people, but he's kind to people who show him that they care about the team and that will do anything for their country. And the only way to understand Rassie is, for me, is that he's trying to do something for his country, for his people, for his region, and that in his heart of hearts, he believes he's doing that. Right or wrong, rough, sometimes a bit weird, he thinks he's making it happen.
Right, let's talk a bit about the product of all Rassie's, you know, stuff, these squad and the depth squad. And I want to just briefly go through all of the positions, starting with number 1. Ox clearly are probably one of the best in the world, if not the best in the world. The question mark is now, who's second? Is it Kitsoff, who's now been injured for a while, neck injury, not a good thing to recover from? I think Gerard Steenekamp has taken the place of the second best loosehead, or the second choice loosehead. Let me rephrase that.
Well, that's one of the biggest unknowns. So Kitsoff has been, though, around for a long, long time. I mean, he was in Craven Week with Ibn and France. And if we suddenly went forward a couple of years and we were in a must-win knockout match, and Steenekamp was running into what sometimes happens when you're at 30 caps, 25 caps, as a prop especially, where something you were doing gets found out or something changes, Kitsoff has a deep, deep well from which to draw. So it's unclear to me if his neck was really fixed right now and he had a good flow, whether he wouldn't go right back into the bomb squad. But the good news is it's a good problem. Like Steenekamp is actually very capable, but you know, there's levels. There's always levels. And you go like, and so let's imagine a World Cup final, and it's a scrum on your 5 meter, and you get to pick between a completely, absolutely fit Kitsoff and Steenekamp. You know, that's something that only Don Human can tell us. So let's just put an asterisk there and say that we know that the 3 are Inche, Steenekamp, and Kitsoff, but we don't know on the day and on the tactic and what they want to see between those 2, because it would be difficult to throw out Steven so easily with all that you know, intellectual property that's been built up over the years.
The other player that comes into this conversation, both on loose head and at the hooker, is Jan-Hendrik Wessels.
Yes.
Now that's a bit of another conundrum. I know Jake is scratching his head about that a bit.
And so there have been a couple of lineups, I'm sorry, the Boks where you want to have 170 passes, 160 passes, where it's speed driven, where you actually sacrifice a little bit in the scrum and you put a Wessels in there for other reasons. And so depending on whether you want to go 7-1 or you want to just run people off their feet, or you can select a particularly speedy Bok team. And that depends, you know, like there's some teams out there that just don't have flatline speed. Ireland's one of those. So there is sometimes a way I think you can get an edge, and it's not like the old days where the edge was always physicality. Now the edge can be for the Boks. We can just play quicker than you, and we can actually be the fresher one in the final 10. And that's working right now against the All Blacks.
Okay, talking about speed, then the hooker is another option. Another thing we have to talk about, Bongi and Marks. Bongi especially seems to be, he's further down the road towards, you know, retirement. Marks and Marks will probably step up as a first choice then. But in terms of their then immediate replacements, we want to call it that, Grobler seems to be the favourite at the moment, but players like Andre Venter and the likes, they definitely must have a chance. And I also saw that Andre Venter bulked up a bit apparently. Interesting phenomenon. Maybe there's something brewing there.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for Venter because I think he might be a victim to the idea of, you know, you don't want to look like you're having favorites and family nepotism. So I think he's a good player. So I think the third hooker is definitely one that is probably the biggest question mark of all. Like in almost every other position, you can go 3 deep and it's pretty easy, and you might even have a tussle between third and fourth. At hooker, because of that strange thing the hookers have to do, which is throw into a line out, it's like you're playing, you're running with the Bulls in Pamplona, and then suddenly you got to make a 3-foot putt. You know, it's a weird thing. It makes no sense almost. So Bongi and Marks have that, you know, and if you were just stacking them in talent, Marks would be number 1. But we know that there's a different way of thinking, which is who do I end my game with? And Marks being an extra fetcher and basically as good a jackler as any loose forward in the world, that's just how it plays. And Bongi brings on set piece, you know, like a really, really good scrummer, difficult scrummer. So yeah, I don't know. I think in 2025, and also this end of year tour, but 2025 for sure, I think the hooker sweepstakes is yet to be decided. I would just pay to be determined in that slot. Grobler, yes, but to be determined.
We spoke to Jacques Willemse last week with Andre Pretorius. I don't know if you saw that, about lineouts specifically. And I asked him about the hookers bulking up so much, typically because they want to do better in the scrums. But that limits their movement in their shoulders. And that affects their throwing, like Joseph Weber, for example. Got a little bit too big in the shoulder area, and then he doesn't have enough, looks like enough movement almost. You know, he said the looseness in the shoulders is critically important. So that's an interesting thing to look out for as well. You can have a scrumming hooker or a throwing hooker, like you said, a 3-foot putter. And how do you sort of marry the two without sacrificing too much from from either of those two aspects of the game?
Yeah, it makes me want to do my traps right now. It's so true. You go into the weight room and you do all that stuff, and you can wind up just inflexible and bulky. You look at a guy like Jamie George, who has the bad throws like everyone else, but over time, he's a very good thrower. Watch him in warm-ups, how many times he can hit, the poles from about 20 meters away, just clockwork. And he's never bulked up. You know, he's just he has really unremarkable shoulder muscles. And then you look at a guy, and golfers always said that, don't ever get too bulky up here because it'll mess up your swing. And you see like a guy like Joe Dweba, super impressive shoulder setup. His rig is great. But then at throw time, it almost like there's no finesse. It just looks really like a concrete block. So yeah, I think it's tough. I think it's one of the most interesting positions in rugby because of what you have to do to survive in the scrum, and then you got to be able to be feathery touch. You're like suddenly you're making a putt like PGA.
There's an easy solution to that. Let Chisholm throw in all the lineouts, and you just go big on the scrums. I mean, that's simple. That's the way to go.
I wouldn't discount that with all the guys kicking now on the weekends that are not number 10. Because if we go down the road of picking fly-offs primarily because of attacking, and then if we just say, why are hookers throwing? There's so many reasons why you might put a number 9 or a blindside wing in there, because it's kind of wasted anyway in a line-out. I've always thought the answer was 9s. 9s are the best at throwing, so why wouldn't they be the best at throwing that way? They're almost always your best golfer on the team anyway. They're just good at repetitive motions, and they have good hand skill, and they know how to hit a target. And they're not afraid because they have to do it 100 times a game. So, for them coming in and throwing and hitting a target like that almost seems easy, and then you have the wraparound move. But no, it's always been hookers. So I think Rassie and co are not tied to this tradition. And if anyone's going to change the story of hookers throwing the line out, it'd probably be them.
I'm going to skip ahead a few positions. I want to talk to you about you had a bit of a controversial selection there of Kwagga as sort of backup for 5, 6, and 7, and 8 to a degree. And people were saying, but how can Kwagga be a number 5 block? It's not what you meant. Just explain to us what you said there.
No, I mean, like if you go, Eben, Argeer, Sous, Lewitt, Salman, Ruan, Jean Klein, Ruben from the Stormers, who never gets picked for some reason. You just keep going, right? Jason Jenkins. I mean, you just keep going. But at the end, I think Kwagga gets ahead of some of those guys because of the ability of Peter Steff and Elrich Lowe to play lock. So all you got to do when you're looking at bench is just say, okay, we're going to do 5-3 this time. I don't even really need a lock. I'm not going to play a lock. I'm just going to shift Peter Steff over there, and he's fine. He'll be man of the match there anyway. And then Kwagga is my actual forward replacement because he's sui generis, as they say in Latin, one of a kind. There is no other Kwagga. I don't think he's a good starter. We saw that. But he's amazing at being the guy you don't have that you bring on as a point of difference, because he's a mismatch against everybody. He's a mismatch against himself. That's why his nose is so messed up. So I just put him there as it makes the picture better actually, but it shows you of the unpredictability of the bench of the bomb squad, because there's plenty of locks you can put down there that are coming back from injury, and until we have Mostert and the Jager finally back, and guys like Klein maybe back, it's hard to know what the depth chart looks like. If you kind of wonder, because of the old test ethos, that Lewitt might just walk right back in the team. I don't know. I mean, he's really a good lineout caller, and he never let the Boks down. So yeah, I think it's very difficult to understand what happens to you on long injury and return. I think Rassie does belong to the old-fashioned view that injury doesn't cost you your spot. And I think he'll at least give you, hey, Jasper Wiese, you were out, not from injury, from ban. Come back in. I don't care how well someone else played. I want to see what it looks like, and then you'll see if you get your spot, which is why I think Kitsoff's still in the picture.
I want to skip ahead a few positions again. We know the old story about the fly-offs and the like. That's been talked about to death. But I want to talk about number 12 center, inside center. And Dame de Lende is the king of number 12. I think we've got a bit of a problem there in terms of depth. It's my opinion. Because I saw you said here, Andre Eritreisen is a second choice, and then a sort of a big question mark about the rest of it.
Right.
I would say David Kriel, just as a matter of interest.
Yeah, David Creel does have good touches on the ball, and it also opens up the cool idea of a Creel midfield. But yeah, it's actually very difficult because, again, we're talking about Tony Brown and what he wants from a 12. So if it's crash ball with soft hands and ability to distribute, that's Andre. But Andre's never shown an ability to keep the ball safe at test level. He's had a difficult time on placement and that final roll, the second roll, and the presentment. He has, and I don't know why. He's a big guy, and he should be able to keep his ball. But Damon, one of the things about Dukes that's uncovered is that Dialende doesn't give up the ball. I mean, he just doesn't get snaffled. He's a bit like Jean de Villiers was in that he feels like you're going to, then he just rolls the ball back anyway. He has good ball sense. And maybe it's because Andre was always so dominant at every level, at schools, at the Quins. He's always been able to dominate physically. But at the top pointy end of test, you don't dominate anybody. You're not going to dominate Bondi Aki physically. He's going to be just there right with you. So I think you have to develop that spider sense of when the ball's in danger. And if your job is to set the ruck, that target ruck for everything else post, you cannot afford to try and do an offload that doesn't work or spill the ball in contact. And for some reason, Andre spills the ball in contact. So I would look not just for the third string, I would look for the second string. And it's not going to be Andre. Andre that's a situational shift. Yes, you can do that. I'm talking about who is the second in line to be the starting 12. Like, who's that? And I think that's up for grabs too. 2025. Well, I think there's plenty of candidates, don't you? I mean, I see a lot of good midfield play. It's just a matter of finding someone, just like they did with Ruan Nortia, and saying, I believe in you. Let's work with you and see what happens.
All right, last position I want to talk about is there's a bit of a conundrum at 15. Rassie has now put up his hand. He's played brilliantly. He's still got has a couple of flaws that need to be worked on. Damian Willems is now back in the thing, and Willie has to get to 100 tests somehow. What's going to happen there? Is he ever going to make it?
Wouldn't that be so sad? We got to get him to 100. Yeah. I would still pick Willems as the starting 15. I think he offers so much. He also kicks, can kick for poles and does very well actually. He's such a confidence player. I think the players around him gain confidence from Willems. So that's why I'd stack it that way. But what a good problem for Willems to have to look over his shoulder all the time and and feel like he's got to keep proving himself. You look at I think it was Jamie George. Sorry to bring him up twice in one pod, but he was talking about how brilliant it is that the Springboks have competition for all positions. Michael Hooper was on Australian TV talking about that same thing about what's wrong with Australian rugby. He said people think they can be okay and keep the jersey. Noah Lolosio at 10, it's okay because even if Bernard Foley isn't the best, if he was in camp, Noah would know that a one bad game and Foley can do the job. And so I think by having Fassi, Willems, Willie, that's amazing. By the way, Willems can play 12. So if we're talking about a shift, there's ability to. Willems is a particularly versatile player, and Fassi is too. He can play wing, but I mean Willems can play anywhere on the back line,
including 10, which he has against the All Blacks, starting at 10 last year.
Yeah, not 9, but he can play 10 through 15. Willems can play 10 through 15.
All right, Harry, that's been a bit of a long one. Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
No, it's been good. It's fascinating to watch Bok rugby right now. This is the golden age.
This is the Lekker Rugby Pod with Harry Jones and Mvia Welman.